Welcome back to another episode of Starving Artists. I have a very exciting episode today. I can't even express to you guys how excited I am to welcome my close friend, Gare Allen, to the podcast. What's up, man?
Hey, LJ, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to see you.
It's good to be here. It's good to have a day off to be able to do this.
So we started talking about this back in August.
We finally made it happen in, what are we, in June?
Yeah, we're literally like almost a year out of it, but it's happening. So for those of you listening who don't know, you should know because he's amazing. But he is an author, and if you haven't yet, pick up every single one of his books and give them all a read. Garrett, I don't know if you've heard the podcast, but I always start these things off asking the guests where they're from and asking, what was that moment for you when you realized that this writing is what you wanted to do?
Well, I'm actually born and raised here in Tampa, Florida, but I always say that my father was from Michigan and my mother from Massachusetts, so I'm a bit of a product of the North. They were Northerners, but I was raised here in Tampa, actually in South Tampa. I think, I had a story in my head for probably 15 years, and it was based on a very specific event that happened to me. And I just kept talking about it and talking about it. And when I started to research, how to write, because I really hadn't done a whole lot prior to that point. It was probably 1995 when I got the story idea, but I didn't put pen to paper until 2012, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd researched, how to write, because I'm kind of a left brain analytical guy, even though I have this creative side. So I kind of have this interesting dichotomy at times. But I needed to know how to do it. I couldn't just dive in. I needed to figure it out and, write an outline and the whole 9 yards. But everything I read, every advice I got from authors was just start writing.
Yeah.
And when I started writing that story, what immediately grabbed me and told me at that moment that this is what I wanted to do was I was able to infuse my personality into the main character very easily because it was based on an event that happened to me. But writing me and being able to be me times 10 and say some of the things that I thought but never vocalized, or do some of the things I thought about doing but never did, the freedom of letting that character kind of do what I, had dreamed or didn't have the guts to do in real life, just absolutely just grabbed me. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can be anybody and do anything in these stories. And that's what grabbed me. And the first, it was a short story and it was just so well received and did so well. And I was so excited, and that was it. It grabbed me and I just ran from there.
That's amazing. So you said 2012, right?
Yeah, I didn't start writing till 2012.
So let me. How old were you in 2012? Can I ask that?
Yeah, you can. It's not a big secret. So we're in, what are we in 2020? Says 8 years ago. So I was 43.
So it was that creativity in your brain, the thought of the story had been in your mind for so long. Was it fear, or just maybe fear of inadequacy, or what might it have been that made you wait so long to do it, since it had been on your mind?
I was heavily working out for about 11 years, 5 days in the gym. I was working a regional job, and I was traveling 4 states. And I think I was more into the physical thing and, being out there, and I was golfing and doing all these outside physical activities. So I think I was just in that stage of my life where I was in really good physical shape. And so I was enjoying that aspect, but I always had this tug, on the other side, that emotional side and that artistry side. And my work did allow me, I wrote policies and procedures for work. I was able to put together, a lot of documents for the company. So that kind of helped me get, scratch the itch, so to speak, artistically. And then, unfortunately, when I got laid off in it was 2014. So I'd already written the short story. And then I just said, you know what, that's it. I need to pick up where I left off. And then I wrote 6 more short stories and completed it. So it's a 7 short story collection. And that was it. The story just came alive and came out of me. But I think the circumstances had to happen where I wasn't traveling I had stopped working out, unfortunately, but sometimes you got to sacrifice things, right? I mean, something's got to give. You don't want to sacrifice the family, you don't want to sacrifice income. So golf, working out, those sort of things just sort of went to the wayside, but it's worth it. You got to give up something to get something sometimes, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's incredible that you found this passion, like at, you said 40, when you said 40.
I'm 43, yeah.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I think that's amazing. Because yeah, I think of, for me with acting, I've been passionate about it since I was 8, right? So I like think, oh, this is always what it's gonna be. But then I found my passion for writing 2 years ago when I wrote A Dream. So I think it's it's something that I never really thought of until recently, how you can keep discovering different things that you're passionate at, maybe something that you didn't realize that you were good at. And I think knowing you and having these conversations with you helped me realize that you can keep finding different things that you're passionate about, and definitely grow that muscle in whatever that may be.
And it's interesting because you're a rapper and you're amazing. I when I first saw you rap, that is not happening. He's dubbing that or something. I had no idea that could come out of you, and it was just amazing. So, but I've always thought this. I've always been a little, not jealous, but I guess envious of singers and songwriters, and because they put together, they have to tell a story, but they only have 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, or whatever. I can use the $80,000 book and tell my story, and get it all out there. But you guys got 3.5 minutes, and you have to become the characters in that 3.5 minutes, and then you have to convey it through song, through inflection, through tone, and literally act it out.
Yeah.
So when I see singers become actors, it's a natural progression from my perspective. I'm like, of course, they're already doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so to be that multi-talented, it's like, yeah. For me, I did a lot of writing, as you know, and then you allowed me to have a very small, amazing part in A Dream. I was so excited to play a retail manager, not a stretch at all, but it was.
You were such for yourself.
But I knew how to do it, so it was an easy bet on your part. So it's all good. But it was the most amazing experience. I've done so many interviews and radio shows and TV shows that cameras literally just I don't even see them. The lights of the cameras, I don't even see them. So there's no issue there for me to get out there. I think the only thing I was worried about was not, I forgot my lines like once or twice, I remember that, but I didn't really worry about it. It was more, I didn't want to hold up production. That was my concern. I didn't want to be the amateur that slowed down the professional, right?
No, I remember that day, because that was my favorite day on set. There were only 8 days, but that specific day, that location, the people that were there, just stand out in my mind. And I remember feeling so bad for you because different things pushed us back. Some of the other actors, like you're mentioning now, forgetting their lines or not being able to get through a scene without breaking or whatever, just pushed us so far behind schedule. And I felt bad for you because you were probably there like 6 hours, 5 hours.
No, I got there at 1 and I left it, I think it was after 1 in the morning. I think it was 12 hours.
No, yeah, I know, but I meant like before we used you for the first time.
Oh yeah, well, I don't care. I was meeting the other actors, the real actors. I wasn't talking to those folks. I was reading over my lines and, compulsively. I was having a blast and just watching the whole thing play out. And, I don't know if anybody watching this doesn't know about A Dream, but, like you said, 8 days you put together this movie, and it was, I don't know, I don't have those kind of organizational skills. I can manage 100 other people to do it for me, but I couldn't do it myself like you did. So kudos.
And there's always going to be a part for you in whatever I do. So get ready. There's more stuff coming.
More retail management positions.
after all of your short stories were finished that you compiled into a book, what was that next book for you? What was that? How did that story come to you? I can't think of the name of it.
So the next book was actually I say that it's my favorite, but they're all so different, and I they represent so many different things. But what happened was everything clicked. So the 7 short stories were based on experiences that happened to me, told through fictional characters that I loosely based on me and other people in my life. And everyone kept asking me, do those things really happen? Do those things really happen? And I said, yeah. And I said, you know what? Let me just write chronologically what happened to me from the time I was 12 years old to 2014 when I released the book, every metaphysical paranormal experience I've had, how I view life, how I view loss. I had experienced some loss at that point in my life, and where I thought I was going, and how Gare sees the world, so to speak, if anybody cared, but I wanted to get it down because, you don't know this yet, but when you get to my age, you start to forget things. And unfortunately, memories start to fade, but they also kind of start to combine.
Right.
So you'll remember going to the circus with Joe. It turns out later it was John. Like, oh crap, I forgot. So you want to keep those preserved. And I thought, what a wonderful way to preserve memories as well. So I wrote a book called The Dead. And it was the first book I wrote that went to #1 in 3 categories on Amazon at the time. And I was just so proud of it. And it was the best written book that I had ever written, because it was literally written from my perspective, and it was chronological. So it kind of helped that left brain analytical side of me, because I could do it in order, and it just flowed out of me. And when something flows out of you, as artistically, it's right. It's when you're forcing something that you're not getting it correctly, right? So, and a lot of artists get that. And so that book just flowed out of me in, I think, 2 months.
That's amazing. And that's exactly it. Like, especially like when we just mentioned a dream, the chronological, because a dream is my life. I won't say it's an autobiographical story, but I think and I've written other stuff, but that's the only thing that's been out there. So I don't want to call myself a writer, but I think writers pull from their own life in different elements and different characters and stuff like that. So when you write from the short stories to that first book to books now, how do you decide what pieces of you that you want to pull out, flesh out in different characters or in different stories?
One of the things I learned back when I was researching, how to write what you know. And at this point, I kind of started writing later in life, but that was good because I had a lot of experience to draw from. And I knew what I was writing about. And I decided I mean, everything's out there. I mean, everything about me is out there. I mean, every experience and my attitude toward thing and good, bad, or otherwise. And I got a couple pretty hard hits from people that say, oh, well, I don't agree with that or whatever. And I was like, sorry. So because to answer your question, you pull from the honest, sincere parts, right? 95% of the people, I think, who read your work or interact with you will respect the fact that you're being genuine and honest. They may not dig it or agree with it, but at least you'll get the respect from them, right? That's how you're coming from. That's where you're coming from. Yeah. And plus it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, here's what I think. And then you can kind of discuss it if there is some sort of opposition or disagreement. And the struggle I had, though, was, okay, I've got a scene with a 14-year-old girl. It's like, oh, how the hell do I write that? So I had, okay, great. I've got a niece who's 14. Perfect. So I'm going to channel my niece for that. So I started to channel other people that I knew in my life to be those characters and to pay homage to them. Like if I were to write about, like I wrote about my friend Scott, I changed the name to Sean. I'd keep the first letter. That way it was I was giving, paying homage to my friend and use, elements of his personality or his experiences. And everybody just appreciated it. They, thought it was amazing, and I was giving kudos to them. But sometimes they were like, do I do that? I'm like, yeah, that's you, man. Like, okay, that's okay, because it's honest and sincere, right?
Now I'll be dissecting your books. All right, this character have an L. Is this me? Like, I'm gonna be paying close attention.
Yeah. You didn't read about LC in that last book that I wrote? You missed that, huh?
So you have such a deep connection with paranormal stories. What formed that connection? So what made you so intrigued in the paranormal?
I didn't go looking for it. I'm not a paranormal investigator or a ghost hunter. I honestly did not go looking for this stuff. Now, I went after the metaphysical side of my life. I did go through a period where I was reading books on reincarnation. I was having regressions and hypnosis and things like that. But the first thing that happened to me was I was 12 years old, and I was in bed, and my bedroom was at the top of the stairs, and I was just laying there, and the family dog was at the foot of my bed, and without warning, the bed just lifted off the ground a couple inches, and it wobbled a little bit, and then it just dropped, and it was a very heavy wood bed, and my dog jumped up, my limbs moved, giving me proof that this actually happened, and I'm just frozen in terror. And just then, my brother had been walking up the stairs, and my door was sort of open just a little bit, and he pushed it open the rest of the way, and the light from the hallway came in, and he goes, "What was that noise?" And I, again, giving me more confirmation that he had heard what had happened, and I didn't say anything. I'm sure I was white with terror, and he just shook it off as another weird little brother moment and walked off. And from that point, I just knew that there was something else out there. I never explained why that happened. And, I had a lot of other experiences throughout, but it was then that I said, okay, there's something to it. And something about that experience also, working retail all your life, it really just wears you down. You get worn down with people, and it's mundane, but the money's good. But, you're like, you just crave something outside of the day-to-day physical life kind of thing. And I think the paranormal and the metaphysical sort of say, hey, there is something different and bigger and outside of this, and something outside of more exciting out of what you're doing. And I think that was the big draw for me. I was like, okay, there's something else. I'm not just wasting my life going to work, working 50 hours a week in retail and coming home and, eating a TV dinner or whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I'm curious if you've ever experienced this. Trying to think of like sleep paralysis. When I was a kid, I used to, is that what it's called? Sleep paralysis?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that used to happen to me all the time. And I can't really remember like specifics of it. I just remember being terrified. I remember actually one time I was probably like maybe like 11. And when I was a kid, whenever I was sick, for some reason, I didn't want to sleep in my bed. I wanted to sleep in the living room. And that was my thing. When I was sick, I would sleep in the living room. And I remember I was asleep, and I woke up probably about midnight or something like that, if I remember correctly. And I think the TV was on, and I was like stuck. And it was the first time that it happened, and it's probably why it's the only one that sticks in my brain. But I was stuck. I couldn't move, and it was like this like little round ball of light that was like, if you've ever had like a bouncy ball and you've been in a room and you've thrown it at the ground and it bounces all over the walls, it was kind of like that, but it was light. And I just remember being terrified and like telling my family about it, and they're like, "Oh, it's just a bad dream, you're fine." But it happened. It happened a lot for a couple of years of different things like that. So have you ever had any experience like that?
Wow. Not like that. I've never experienced the bouncy ball. I mean, I've seen apparitions, and the sleep paralysis I definitely had when I was younger. And not only was there, I'd wake up and I couldn't move, but I was trying to scream. And of course, your voice won't even work, although you can kind of just faintly hear the air coming out, but you're trying to have a full on scream, right?
Yeah.
And I do remember knowing that there was someone right behind me, but I couldn't turn and look. But yeah, I've had a lot of different experiences in the sleep. I read up on that, and there was a thought that, well, there were a lot of explanations, and the most common one was you were astral projecting, and as you were coming back in, you consciously woke up before you fully came back in. Your spirit came back in your body, and so you didn't have control of the motor skills. That was the metaphysical explanation of the most common one. And then right behind that was you were being attacked.
See, that makes sense. Like, it makes me. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Insidious.
I did.
And that, because that's kind of, what was it? What did you say?
Astral projection.
Because that was a big theme in that movie. And I always felt like that was kind of like similar in a sense there. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'd like to go with that because number one, if you're astral projecting, you're doing something like that, it's you. You're in control and it's your situation. Maybe scary, but at least it's you.
Yeah.
The idea of something, harmful or another entity or spirit or whatever, something like that coming into your bedroom and attacking you, or that bothers me on a couple levels, not just the obvious that you're being attacked by something unseen, but also that it came into your bedroom. And when you're in your house, I mean, even your friends don't go in your bedroom when they come over, right? That's like your sacred space, right? You don't go in there. So to think that something's in there when you're 100% vulnerable sleeping, that's pretty scary stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that makes you put salt along the windowsills and that kind of stuff, right?
I knew this guy. I only met him a couple times. Can't remember his name, but he had a tattoo right here on his chest. It was the demon protection tattoo from Supernatural. And I was like, "Oh, do you like the show?" He said, "Well, I love the show, but I also don't want to be possessed." I was like, okay. And
wow.
But so do you have any like, you and I, we've talked about it. So for the audience, what shows, supernatural-esque, paranormal-esque shows do you gravitate to that you're watching and it's maybe intriguing and you think back on all the experiences you've had, the different things you may have studied, or maybe you just look at it and laugh and be like, nope, that's not real.
I don't really watch a lot of the paranormal investigation shows. I did back in the day. I watched the Ghost Hunters for a long time.
Yeah.
And, the left brain side of me was like, I don't know if it's real. I don't know if they've doctored the footage. And I couldn't get past that. And I said, well, I've had enough experiences and I can have more experiences of my own. So I focused on those. But, Supernatural, you talked about, that show is that Eric Kripke wrote that, or he produced it and directed. I'm not sure if he wrote it, but the idea for this show was the 5-season arc. And it was just, the first 5 seasons are just amazing. The way it starts and how it ends, and the story is just fulfilling, amazing. It's real life and it's paranormal and it's metaphysical and it's all these things. And I remember thinking how satisfying it must have been for this guy to take this 5-season story and bring it to life and be able to do that. And now they're finishing their 15th season, which is their last season. But those first 5 seasons, that just got to me emotionally. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, because I was like, that's what I want. I want my story out there, and I want the full story. Not just a season of, book 1. I want everything out there. But that show really did just a fantastic job of bringing all those elements of the paranormal, the metaphysical, pulling on lore. The whole demon protection tattoos. I mean, when I look up the stuff that's on there, it's like, yeah, I see where they're pulling from, and they take some liberties with it, sure, for the fact of storytelling and to make it more exciting. I mean, sure, that makes sense, but it's based in some sort of experience. I mean, they even had a Krampus episode, which it's just freaking hilarious.
That's honestly one of my favorite shows. Like there's really not. I can only think of one season that was a miss for me, and that was the Leviathan season.
I was just going to say, I think if I remember correctly, they thought they were canceled after 5, but they had told their story, and then CW, or maybe was it UPN back then? I don't even remember.
It was, WB back then.
Oh, WB, there you go. And they said, okay, we want you back. And they were like, they had to scramble to put that season together. And it wasn't hateful, but it was nowhere near the caliber of what we had just watched in the first 5.
Those first 5 seasons were
phenomenal. And then they finally started to climb back up. And so.
No, and so what you were talking about, like with your stories and wanting to flesh them out, like, similarly to how they did with Supernatural. I always like, and this about me, like I always like to work with the people that I know, the people I love, the people I care about. And so that's like a dream of mine, is to work with you to bring your stories to life. Like at some point, and we've talked about me writing a screenplay with you for one of your books, and I still want to do that. I can't wait for that day that we can work together on something to bring it to life on in terms of screen.
Oh, I love, me too. And you know, one of those things, just like anything, you don't want to force anything. When the energies are ready to align creatively and you're
Yep.
both able to give, you know, then that's when you don't force it, right? Because you don't want to you want it to be the best it can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, when two artists come together, and you know, I think a lot of people, you know, artists were solo acts, you
Hmm.
know, by nature. You know, Van Gogh didn't have a buddy next to him painting,
Hmm.
right? He was doing it himself.
Yeah.
So to sort of say here's some of my creative license, take it. It's like, no, that's mine. You know, you can't have any of that.
No.
But you got to trust and know that other people have a different perspective, and they can enhance, not change or alter, but you know, enhance what you're doing. And you
Yeah.
got to have the confidence in the person you're working with. But yeah, I mean, I love collaborative stuff. I love seeing that on TV when I see two different people wrote something together. I'm like, wow, how did they do that? Because I've never sat down and wrote with somebody. I'm like, these guys must be super good friends.
Well, and that's always you know, we've had this conversation, but that's always a fear too of harming the friendship, which happens,
Sure.
and we both know that happens. But you know, I think we can make something good together for sure, um, and I can't wait for that. Um, so let's talk about your day gig, which is how we met. So 2016, 17,
17?
2017, I was working for one grocery company, and I left that grocery company to, can we say the name?
I don't know.
um, let's just say all good things about the place, and we'll be fine. So I left Publix, and I went to work for a new grocery company. Can I say it? What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, so I left Publix to go work for Sprouts to open their first store in Florida, which is in Carrollwood, Tampa, and that is where I met Gare. Gare was my boss, and I'll say this: like when I met you, I think there's always going to be between an employee and a boss, in terms of the employee, a little bit of maybe trepidation there. But when I met you, like there was no like trepidation. Like I thought you were a good dude. Thought you were cool. I trusted you and I liked you, and I just knew we'd work well together. That was my experience when I first met you, when we were practically just building the store.
Yeah. You know, it was interesting because I didn't come from the grocery industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'd worked in the pet industry for, you know, I don't know, 12, 13 years. So I really had a lot to learn. And that store broke records for the company. So it was super busy, as you know. And I don't know, there were, I don't know, 180 of us running around bumping into each other trying to figure out what was happening. But I have a distinct memory of, and I think you were getting ready to leave and go back to your other job, or you got a new job. But I remember you stopping me and saying, "Hey, I didn't realize you were creative."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I had never heard it put that way before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "What?" And you told me about your experience, and I was like, "Oh." I was like, "That's pretty cool." And it's sort of like I was like, "Oh, I'm part of a cool club I didn't even know I was in. That's pretty neat."
I
But
remember.
I loved how you worded it. I was like,
Yeah.
"That's awesome," you know, because there's and we forget this, but there's always so much more to everyone we meet. And it doesn't, you know, I'm not saying they have some major skill, but they have a passion, or they have this other life, or just whatever it is that they endeavor to do, or love in life. And there's always something else to somebody. But unfortunately, we have this tendency to sort of like put them in a category and think we know everything about them right
Yeah.
out of the gate. And that's not the case by any means. So I had no idea you were a child actor, and you rapped, and then I was later going to be in a movie you made. If you told me that day that all that, I was like, okay, I don't know who you are, but get back to work because you're very strange.
I forget her name. It was she was a cashier, and she also worked in the deli. And she was telling me, she's like, "Oh my god, I'm so excited! Gary's an author, and he writes my favorite theme type of books. And he grabbed one from his trunk and he gave it to me, and I'm going to read it. And I'm so excited." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, he writes books. I need to talk to him." I remember that so vividly.
And I did keep books in my trunk. I sure did.
And that there's a rapper in you, because rappers keep CDs in their trunks to pass them on. So there's a
You
rapper.
know, anytime that I think I was in Tennessee on vacation last October, and somebody caught us outside of Dollywood, and he had a CD, and I never listened to it. I don't know. but I bought it because I don't care what this is. I'm going to support you.
Yeah,
Starving artist, right? I'm,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to support this guy.
So you're the store manager at Sprouts Farmers Market, which if anybody works in the grocery industry, you know that these store managers work insane amount of hours and have a lot of responsibility. So I wanted to mention this just because I think there's a very interesting dichotomy where you work such a heavy full-time job while also pursuing your creative passion. So can you tell me what that dichotomy is like for you and your brain experience in it? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are working a day job, hoping that one day they can reach whatever level of whatever it is they want to do. So what has
Sure.
that experience been for you?
Well, I'm a human being too, and I'm prone to the same behaviors as anybody else. It just because I've found some discipline over the last 8 or 9 years doesn't go back to the days when I was working out. I was traveling 5 states. I had every excuse in the book not to work out, but I carved out 5 days a week and I made it happen. And I saw the physical results, and it was absolutely worth the effort for many years. So when it came to writing, I don't have time to write. Well, you had time to go to the gym 5 days a week, so you certainly have time to write. So it doesn't matter if you're working 40, 50, 60 hours. You can make it happen. Maybe it's one less episode of Supernatural that day or that week. One
Yeah,
less, sitting home watching, reality TV with a couple glasses of wine. You can make it happen. So what do you want?
right.
What is it you really want if you were to pass tomorrow? What do you want to leave behind that got through that Netflix series? Is that really, watching, or that you wrote something and
Yeah,
realized something for yourself? And when I write, I do it for me. And
yeah,
yes, I have a goal. If I could do it full time and support myself, then absolutely, that would be amazing. I'd love to work the hours I work at Sprouts, but in writing. And that is the goal.
right.
But it's all about discipline. But there are days mentally I don't have it in me. And like I said before, you don't force, the creative process. It's got to come out. But there are days where I'm like, okay, I think I've watched enough Hulu. I think I should probably go and type a few things out on the computer and make it happen. So that's that's it. I'm not saying that I don't want to let this come out wrong, but we're all more than what we do. A
Yeah,
lot of, I think, and we know that.
yeah.
And if we are lucky enough to identify that passion, and then it's up to us to carve out the time to make it happen.
Mhm.
And the rewards are more than worth it, at least in my experience.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Um, so you're actually, when I called you, you were writing, and I interrupted that, and I apologize. Um,
That's
so
okay.
you're working on a new book, a new novel. Well, can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, sure. So, oh God, I'm actually overdue. I was supposed to go out last year, and with everything going on in the world, I think I get a pass on this one. So,
Right.
but yeah, I put out a book 2018 called Ghost Crimes, and it
Mm.
was based on it's a fictional story.
It's an amazing
However,
story, by the way.
what's that?
An amazing story.
Thank you. It's a fictional narrative with police cases that are based on actual cases, and it chronicles Detective Burke through about in 18 or 20 years, and he experiences reluctantly a lot of paranormal, metaphysical cases that result in some pretty horrific things and really mess up his life. And I had reached out to a lot of first responders and gotten some, hey, this is what happened to me, and that's what happened to me. And I took those stories, and then there's even a story from my childhood in there, and then I weave them into his life. And it came out so well. And on the Audible book, one of my friends listened to it, and he said, I really enjoyed it because the narrator sounded like, I don't know if you can remember, you're very young, but there was a show called Dragnet, and it was very, this is what happened on this date and this time, it was very, official sounding.
Right.
And so it read like a police report.
Mhm.
And I was very proud, and it was the second book to go to #1 in several categories, #1 new release on Amazon.com. I was very proud of it, did very well. And so I'm writing Ghost Crimes 2, and it picks up where about a year after where the last book left off. And so I've got all new cases and experiences for these guys. And I brought 3 characters together at the very end of the first book, and so they're starting out together in this one. So in the other book they were separate and alone dealing with it. Now they've banded together, and so it's a lot of fun, but it's hard to write for 3 or 4 hours one day and then not write for 5 days.
Yeah.
Because that's out of your head now. So I almost have to do a refresher. So I've learned now that things are simmering down out there, I'm putting my days off back to back so I can get that little stretch of time. So you learn how to make things happen with your schedule and your responsibilities, that sort of thing.
So I don't think I've ever even said this to you, but after reading Ghost Crimes, to me, what it was reminiscent of, because when I read a book, a lot of the books I read are like autobiographical, but when I read like a fiction, I always like paint that picture in my head of like how it would come off on screen, and especially because we have talked about a screenplay for this. To me, it comes off like HBO's True Detective / Netflix's Mindhunter meets Supernatural, and that's how it meshes in my head. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny you say True Detective, because that was the very first thing I thought when I sent it to you and you read it. And originally I said, okay, let's just make this a movie. And you were like, well, what about doing, shows, several episodes, because they are separate case files and they can stand alone even though they weave together. And I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And the first thing that popped in my head was True Detective. I was like, yeah, I actually like that more than the movie idea. Yeah. So the second one is actually not formatted that way. So I'm not sure if that would be able to follow that or not, but I'm only about 7 or 8 chapters into it right now. So I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Yeah. No, I can't wait to read it, because that first book was amazing. And to anybody listening, please pick it up, because I vouch for it. I know if you were to read it, you all would love it.
Yeah, it's a little graphic in places, but I had to I had to be true to the story and what had happened, and some of the horrific thing that happens are very important to the character's development. So I had to get all the senses to experience what happened in there.
Yeah. To this day, by the way, I still think we should. I don't know if it's a book. I don't know if it's a screenplay. I still think that you and I should write an Employee of the Month-esque, film or book based on our experiences at Sprouts, because we've had some very interesting employees there.
Wow. There were some troubling days. I tell you, I had one of those days yesterday. I went home and I was just shaking my head. I think I was still shaking my head when I walked through the door, 25 minutes later after leaving work. But I thought the same thing. And at first I was like, I need to write a book about what happened. And I said, no, I don't want to give it that much time. I want to focus on my paranormal, right? And I want to give work even more time outside of work. Yeah. And then I said, well, maybe I could just write an article, and kind of some funny points. And I said, you know what? Actually, no, I think a movie where literally I walk through the doors at the beginning of the movie and I walk out of the doors at the end of the movie, and just all the nonsense in between would just, you have 80 to 90 employees to get through in that 2 hours, right? So there's so much material that we can pull from, right?
Like the story, the memory that always comes to mind is the cashier who wasn't great at cashiering, who was then moved to the bulk department but was allergic to peanuts.
But yet shoved her hands into the container of peanuts, only to come to me a moment later blown up like a balloon. And then after I get her all the antihistamines and that she needed, or I don't even know, whatever it is we got her, and then she holds up her finger and there's just blood pouring, and she goes, oh, we should probably do something about this too. And I said, how'd you cut yourself? And she said, on a paper cutter. And I said, a paper cutter? I said, oh man, I don't even know. I think that was an hour and a half just to get all that taken care of. And yeah. Funny you remember that.
She's just, I can never forget her, because she used to annoy the living hell out of me every day. We'll leave it at that. what advice would you have for any of the starving artists out there?
You know, I have a friend of mine, Joni Mahan, and she's an amazing friend. I call her a super author. I think she's up to 20 something books that she's published, and then she has many more that she's written and not published. And we both worked for the same company and the same regional job, and both got laid off at the same time. So our paths were very similar, and we didn't realize each other wrote until we got laid off. It's just the craziest thing. But that brought us together, and she's an editor, she's an author, she's just all around amazing. But it's interesting is she chose to, she works from home and she does ghost walks in her town of New Harmony, Indiana, you know, haunted town. And she does all these crazy things to make ends meet. And I chose to get the, you know, classic, you know, retail gig, you know, with the benefits and all that, and the safe way, I guess is the best way to put it. And so we're both trying to make our dreams happen, you know, so our conversations are interesting from our different perspectives, but it doesn't matter how you carve out the time or how you make things happen. But, you know, some people say, oh, you took easy, you took a job, you know, you try working 55, 60 hours a week and trying to write. You know, Joni might have a little more time, but she's struggling, you know, with, you know, the everyday benefits and things like that. But she makes it happen. So with regard to writing, just write, just start, because once you start, then it'll keep going, and you'll get your own way and your own process. And, you know, for me, I do an outline. I know exactly where I'm going in the next chapter. Joni literally just writes and it flows out of her with no outline. So it doesn't matter. We're completely different in how we do things, but you just got to do it and make sure you got some food in the fridge. So that is unfortunately the number one. So you still got to eat, or you're not going to be able to write. But yeah, just do it. Don't get rid of the excuses and just do it. It's no different than people that, you know, want to exercise. You know, you can do it. Like I said, one less TV show, you know, one less hanging out with the friends, you know, whatever it is you're doing, you know, you still want to do those things because they're therapeutic, but you can still carve out the time. Even an hour a week is something. It means you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
And you are a writer, by the way. If you've written something, you're a writer.
I'm going to say, if I've learned anything, it's to quit working out and just work on my creativity.
I didn't say that.
You know me, I don't work out anyway, so it's okay.
I miss it dearly. But I do remember when after I was laid off and I was writing, I looked at the clock and it was time to meet my friend at the gym. And I distinctly remember the moment I had a choice. I could spend 2 hours at the gym or write for 2 more hours. And I wrote. And I remember that moment. That's when I turned the corner and I made writing the priority.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you made me think of, so you were at the premiere for A Dream, but Jonah was on tour, so he couldn't go. So I had brought the film to his house to watch with him and his family because he hadn't got to see the final product. And I don't want to give any spoilers out there, but you know how it ends. Eddie's conflict with you, and not really a conflict, but the you know how that ends. And so the Jonah and his family, they're like, all right, quitting my job tomorrow. Hashtag do it for Eddie. And so you made me think of that.
That is not the message that I wanted to send.
No, you didn't. You just made me think of it. But no, you're absolutely right, and that's something that, I mean, I was recently laid off, and you know that, and so I've had more time to focus on this podcast, more time to focus on acting and writing, and so like I just my second screenplay is finished. It's called Divine Tragedy, which was teased at the end of A Dream. And no, you're absolutely right. So having that time, and even when I was still working, it's like when I came home, I'm an actor, so I like to watch movies and TVs. I could sit down and binge Sons of Anarchy, or I can write the next 30 pages of the script. And it's a decision to make. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. And Gary, I just want to thank you for coming on. This was a blast. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's good to see you face to face. And we got to go out to lunch. I tried yesterday, but you told me no. And
I was working.
I know. I give you a hard time any chance I get. But look, Gare, I love you, man. Thank you for coming on. This was awesome. And you want to let the people know where they can find your book, follow you online.
Yep. So thank you. I appreciate it. So you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's Gare Allen. And you can go to my website, gareallen.com. But all of my books are available on Amazon.com, Kindle, paperback, and they're all on audiobook now as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is another episode of Starving Artists, and we will catch you guys next week. Peace.